How you guys doing today? This is Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk, only show on the air dedicated to law enforcement. Don't forget, guys, you can follow us on multiple venues: iHeartRadio, TuneIn, YouTube, Spreaker.com, Player FM, Stitcher Radio. The list is growing. Got the YouTube channel. Got to get that traffic over to that YouTube channel, which would work. It's doing okay, but I'd like to see it grow a little bit better. I also have a page, a Tier Talk page on Facebook. We're almost at 25,000 followers. That's great. That's growing. And also, don't forget, I have an app. It's a free app. You can download it. It's on iOS and Samsung devices. Okay, so today is going to be very interesting. Today I'm in Florida right now, guys, and it's hot, as you can tell. But if you look behind me, I'm actually in a boxing ring. As soon as I came in, I realized I'm not actually the man that I thought I was. That's the funny thing. But so anyway, so we're in Florida. I want to do a very diverse show. So today you're going to see I have a panel. My panel is going to consist of the first time I ever met one of my regular guests, Gary York, the author of Corruption Behind Bars. I'll have you introduce yourself in just a moment. Yes, also, on this side here, I have retired captain of 24 years for the Florida DOC, Captain Duane Canady, correct?
Correct.
And I also have, sitting right in the middle, former heavyweight champion boxer. Also, I believe you're running for Congress, right?
I did run for the United States Congress.
Oh, he did run for the United States Congress, and he's been on my show before. Former heavyweight champion Jameel McCline. So before we go ahead and do our topic, first I want to just have everybody introduce themselves to make sure I didn't miss anything. So, Gary York, I finally get to meet you.
Yes, sir.
Wait, hold on. Let me shake your hand.
We're in person.
Holy
finally.
crap!
2.5 years.
No,
finally.
more. Almost
more
four.
Than that, almost four.
Almost
Wow.
4. Guys, this is what he looks like. You know what I mean?
They hear me for all these years, but they never see me.
Yeah, this is what you look like. So, Gary, can you introduce yourself to my audience again?
Yes, I'm Gary York. I have 10 years military police experience and almost 28 years in the field of corrections. I was a correctional officer in the state prison system. I was a probation officer. And I was a senior prison inspector in the state of Florida for many, many years, conducting civil, criminal, and administrative investigations. And I'm very happy and honored to be here with these group of people tonight. And I thank you.
Hey, Gary, thank you, boss.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, so, and also you brought someone with you today, right? You brought retired Captain Duane Canady. He's a retired captain from the Florida Department of Corrections.
And we worked together for many years.
Duane, you mind introducing? It's your first time I've had you on my show, so can you introduce yourself?
My name is Duane Canady. I've worked with the prison system for 24 years. Gary and I worked together at Polk Correctional for many years. Been friends. I've been on SWAT team. I'm an instructor for Polk Community College for the Criminal Justice Academy. Been on many other things, run Scared Straight programs, instructor at the institution, and pretty much everything dealing with Department of Corrections.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for coming. I know it's the first time. And now, without further ado, I also have former heavyweight champion, retired. I'm assuming,
retired,
right?
Absolutely.
Jameel McCline. Do you mind reintroducing yourself? Now, he's been on my show before, guys. We had a great show, and I'm going to tell you why I wanted to bring him on again. But in the meantime, can you introduce yourself again?
Hello, my name is Jameel McCline. I am the former heavyweight champion. I live here in Delray Beach, Florida. We are in Boca Raton, Florida currently, which is only one town over from where I live. This is my establishment, big time boxing and fitness. We train everyone from some of the best fighters in the world to some of the best amateurs in the world, some of the best pros, and some of the best mom and pop soccer moms and soccer dads in Palm Beach County. I am also a former United States Congress candidate, and I am also currently an entrepreneur here in Palm Beach County.
Now, real quick, I notice everybody's going to see us sweating, so I'm going to ask the expert, why is there no air conditioning in here?
Okay, so the air conditioner is purposely turned off. As a matter of fact, I turned it on about 10 minutes ago to kind of cool it down, because when the fighters train here, when you fight under those lights on TV, you see those lights that they fight under. Those lights are very, very hot. People don't know that. That's why we train in the heat, because once you get to fight night, it's 100 degrees inside that ring. People don't know that, but it's very, very hot.
Well, again, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for having us come down. That's awesome.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, so again, I have a very diverse panel. Everyone has a history inside corrections that's a little bit different. So I'm going to briefly explain the history real quick. Okay, so my history right off the bat is I'm on the administrative end, but I've worked both as an officer and as a sergeant. I worked as an officer inside a female facility and as a sergeant in a male facility. Gary is a retired inspector who has investigated many cases, including high-level corruption cases, which includes, that's why you authored the book Corruption Behind Bars and Inside the Inner Circle, correct?
Yes.
Duane, retired Captain Duane Canady, now he obviously has a rich experience, everything from training to being on SWAT, just a tremendous amount of experience that spans across 24 years. And here's a unique perspective here. Former heavyweight champion Jameel McCline has served time in jail in Rikers Island, correct?
Rikers Island, Comstock, Sing Sing, and Attica.
Okay, now total of how many years did you serve?
5 years.
Okay, 5 years. And the reason why I want this perspective is because we're ever going to create change, change has to include every perspective. You know, people that defend multiple perspectives. I'm for the safety and security aspect of it all. You know, I'm very pro-staff, but all because I'm pro-staff doesn't mean I'm against life. It means that I know that our number one job is to self-preservation, but also the preserving of life.
That's one of the reasons why I've agreed to do the show, and that's why I've come on again, is because, you know, you want a diverse opinion. You just don't want the one-sided opinion that I think does not help growth and moving the cause forward.
And you know what's funny? The reason why I want to have you back on the show was because even though you mentioned some corrupt staff, you were also quick to create the balance, saying that it wasn't everyone, and that's also one of the reasons why I had Gary on my show 4 years ago. I met Gary. It was about 4 years ago, Gary, 3 to 4 years ago. Yeah. And Gary was the author of Corruption Behind Bars, and I knew it was about corrupt staff. And I was so nervous to have Gary on the show because I did not know the take that my audience would have.
Right.
But the thing is, it's real.
Yeah.
It happens.
Real.
Right, and you can't sit there and deny it. So I say, you know what? If there are flaws, embrace it, eliminate that cancer, and do what we can to fix it. But we can't fix it by hiding it, by sweeping it under the rug. And I think that's what we do, is we create the balance so people still know that there's professionalism, but having said that, there's still that element that has to be weeded out. And that element also makes the other professionals look bad, by the way, which I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, so let's start off real quick about your book that you wrote,
Right.
Corruption Behind Bars.
Right.
Okay, so why, at the time when you wrote the book, why do you think there was a need for that book?
Okay, you talked about safety and security for staff members and everyone working in the prison system. And I wrote the book after many years of conducting criminal investigations, unfortunately catching a few bad apples, smuggling drugs in, smuggling weapons in, smuggling all types of contraband in, which endangers the entire prison system. See, I'm for safety and security of not just staff. I'm for safety and security of the staff, the inmates, the nurses, the teachers, the librarians. I'm for safety and security of everyone behind that fence, and that includes all the inmates in orange and blue, because that's our job. They've been sentenced by the court to go to jail or prison, not to come in for abuse or punishment, and definitely not brought in the prison system to have some bad apples smuggle drugs, needles, and weapons in to just aid to their habits or bad habits. We want to try to change their life in any way we can, even if it's a minute way, so when they step out of that prison system, hopefully they have a shot at not coming back. So that's why I've been on this strong march to get the cancer out of the prison system, fight corruption, and remove the bad people from the prison system.
Right, and I have to agree, because I'm going to tell you something. The bad people are the reflection, they turn out to be the generalized reflection of who we are, and that's not the case. I'm going to tell you something. There's
Right.
going to be professionals that when you talk about the system and you badmouth it, there are going to be people that are going to say, well, wait a second. Wait a second, that's not the whole system. And I'm going to find that, me being a professional, I'm going to find that as insulting. Because I sit there and I do my job every day. I do what I'm supposed to do. And now, unfortunately, my positive interactions, they don't exist. It's always going to be outshined by the one negative interaction. Now, I'm going to stretch across to you, Duane, real quick. In the course of your 24 years as a captain, well, you went out through custody levels, correct? Yeah. So, in the course of your 24 years, I'm sure you've seen corrupt staff, right? But I'm also sure that you've seen staff that excels.
Oh, yes.
So having said that, obviously there's that need for someone to investigate corruption, right? There's that need for that window so you guys know that corruption exists. That means the communication that you may have with the inmate population as well as with other staff member. But as a captain, especially, you retired on the upper echelon of management, the administrative end, how good is it to know that you have an objective agency like an inspector like Gary York investigating that corruption to make the jail or prison a safer place?
it does make it a lot safer when we have people like Gary. You know, it's really sad because you have good and you got bad, and no matter what job you have, you're going to have people that are going to try the system, and when they bring drugs in, it not only harms the officers, but it harms the inmates and could possibly go over to the public. But in one person, it's really sad that one person can make all these other officers that try to do the right thing to make them look bad, which I cannot stand a bad officer because it makes the rest of us look bad.
Right, and ultimately also it could jeopardize the safety and integrity of the facility.
Right.
Let's not. You know, if I'm a correctional officer and I'm walking on a tier with somebody, I need to trust that individual. So if I can't trust that individual, he's bringing stuff in. It's not just him that could be affected if something goes wrong. It's inmates, staff. You know what I mean? Because the integrity of the facility has been jeopardized. Now, in your case, Jameel, you have a different perspective. Your perspective is as an inmate in multiple facilities, from a jail level to a prison level.
Correct.
So you've witnessed the good and the bad, and you shared some of those stories. So, you know.
Well, the most important thing is that, you know, I think what some of the correction officers and administration forget is that one day, unless that inmate is serving life, one day that inmate or that person will integrate back into society. So no one is there to be placated, no one is there to be pampered. They're there to serve their time, but they're also not there to be dehumanized and not shown dignity and respect. So having said that, when you do that to an inmate, which I have seen, not widespread, I will say that it's not widespread, but when you do that to an inmate that is going to be released into the community, what I think is most important, I think people overlook, is that one day that inmate will become a citizen again. Now it's up to us of how we're going to make that citizen respond once they're back in society. Are they going to be resentful to the system? Are they going to be willing to go out and get their lives back together and get a job and become an active, productive member of society? So I think it has a lot to do with not their experience in prison, because prison is obviously for prisoners. But it's not that. But they're not there to be dehumanized either, and that's one of the things that I've experienced at certain times. Not all the way through the system, you know, but you know, not all guys are intelligent enough or have an understanding of the different. You know, the difference of, you know, listen, this is only prison. This is not everyone. This is not every cop. This is not every correctional. This is not every white person for the black guys in jail. You know, so once they hit the street, they, you know, that's my biggest thing, is I'm always looking to make sure that we are treating the inmates with dignity, not necessarily pampering them and giving them all these treats and wonderful things to do, but that's where I stand on that.
Well, one of the things you mentioned, actually, and I want to go back, and that's why I had you on the show, is you being behind the wall, having that perspective. You've seen corrupt staff, right? You've had some interesting stories to tell, but then you're able to leave that facility knowing that it wasn't everyone. So can you just talk about some of your experiences where you dealt with the bad and the good? Give us the balance.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, for the most part, everyone is there. You know, you were behind the wall. Everyone wants to go home. Everyone wants to go home. Everyone wants this. You know, everyone wants everyone to have a not necessarily a pleasant experience, but definitely an experience where they feel they're being treated like men. But on the other hand, you know, I've experienced, you know, very sadistic behavior behind the wall, and from some of the officers, but it wasn't all of them. You know, I've been beaten simply for being very big. I mean, I was 6'6", 290 pounds, 20 21, 22 years old, just really just jacked to the bone and fearless. So that was very intimidating to some of the some of the staff. And the other thing I thought was that my level of intellect, I thought that intimidated them very much as well, because now I wasn't the average, the average inmate. Not only was I big and strong, I was definitely writing letters to my congressman, believe it or not, to my senator, to my attorney general, just because I knew that's how I would make change.
Let me just ask you a question. Is that part of the reasons why, when you got out, and I know you had your career in boxing, but after that you crossed into the political field?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I found politics in solitary confinement. I did 14 months in solitary confinement. So
how many months was that?
I did 14 months in solitary confinement. That's a long time. Yeah. So and I had a little transistor radio, and I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh, believe it or not, every day. So that's where I found politics. So that's why I am still fiscally conservative, but socially liberal.
Well, you know what's funny is, when we had the conversation last time, I'll go back to Gary. Me and Gary have done the show multiple times, and I don't believe in the left or right of anything. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't believe in the extreme left or right. I think the harder ground is the middle ground. And I think last time I had you on the show, Jameel, we actually talked a lot about the middle ground, which nobody wants to cover. There is a compromise here. And I remember that I don't know if you agree with me on this. Let me tell you something real quick. I thought there was a conflict between both sides. And when I did the Al Sharpton show and we were talking, I thought that the conflict was this. You have the one side that looks for the innocent amongst the guilty. Okay, so you have that frame that, you know what, when we as law enforcement, we're going after that guilty, we're so concerned about that threat that we do what we can until we can eliminate that threat, because of the threat to safety, security, well-being. But then there's the other side where, while we're looking for that threat, are we kind of destroying other people's rights in the process? Are we stepping on the innocent just to eliminate that threat?
From the inside, it's the same as it is from the outside. There's some good guys on the inside, and there's some bad guys. I mean, I ran into guys that were just absolute monsters, but for the most part, they were all good guys. They're paying their debt to society in prison. So it's the same. It's the same blanket swipe of judgment that's put on the athletes. I'm in the gym. On the inmates, as it is on the staff. As it relates to media.
Well,
I just want to say one thing, because he's right on the point now.
Oh, yeah.
On the way over here, Captain Canady and I were talking, and he was telling me stories. Captain Canady was a self-defense instructor, and he was very good in martial arts in his day. And he was telling me he didn't have to use that. Tell the story, Duane, about how they thanked you for some of the things you did.
Well, my motto was always to be fair but firm. And I always told the truth. If I told an inmate, officer, either one, that I was going to do something, I did all in my power to do it. And I had a lot of respect from the inmates. I've been out on the compound where somebody had just gone off with a weapon or whatever, and I'd wind up just he and I, and we'd be on the ground. And I'd turn around and look, and I'd have inmates lining up to protect me, because there was an old habit, if an officer was out on the yard somewhere and he was by himself down with another inmate, well, they like to run by and use his head for a football and just keep running, and you couldn't identify that person. Sure. So, you always had to be careful. But you always had to be fair and firm to inmates and officers. Either way, you got to have that respect. You have to have the respect of your officers. You have to have the respect of the inmates and the upper staff. If you have that, you have a lot more control of your institution.
Right,
and a lot more safety.
I want to agree with that, actually. I agree 100%. 9 times out of 10, everything can be handled through, 9 times out of 10, not 100%, communication. You know,
Yes,
that's why
good communication.
I believe an ongoing class in correction should be interpersonal communications, you know, because especially now with dealing with inmates that have more special needs, you know, you got to train the officers so they know how to deal with a vulnerable population. Because unfortunately right now, that population right now has, especially I see the problems in Rikers Island right now, the population has become very troublesome and staff doesn't know how to deal with them. So, you know, there's different approaches. And also I believe that there's a cross-perspective training that needs to be involved where we can train staff to kind of see the different perspectives of the different departments and see how we work together as one. Like, you know, from custody to mental health to, I mean, especially when you get to the administrative level, you actually start to see how the departments start to mold together. And ultimately, and I think you would want to see this, Jameel McCline, is the fact that ultimately our goal is rehabilitation. Right. Believe it or not, it's making sure the inmates are left out with better tools to make better choices. But for somewhere along the line, the public doesn't see that or they don't know it.
Well, you know, I tell you, I've definitely seen, you know, talking to you guys here before we started the show, you know, asking some personal questions with of the captain here. You know, I and from you as well. You're telling me they have tablets now in prison. You know, it's a whole different world.
Say that tablets, guys, tablets.
You know, tablet. You know, so I tell you, you know, it's a whole different world now. That I do believe that we have definitely moved the bar, which is very important, because if you can move the bar just that much, it keeps the inmates safer, it keeps the staff safer, which is really the ultimate goal. So in moving that bar, I've seen from talking to you guys that there is more dignity shown toward the inmate. There is more respect shown toward the inmate, and I think that's really, I think that's how you de-escalate. I hear about de-escalation training. I hear about the things they do now for to protect other inmates from sexual assault. You know, when I was in prison, they didn't have any of this stuff. You know, I remember when, you know, they were like line up on the wall, and if you move, the exact words, line up on the wall, and if you move, you will receive proper medical attention. So, what they were saying is, if you move, you will get hurt, and it's not like that now. And you know, and like I said, you know, I just don't really like the whole blanket sweep across both the inmates and the corrections officers, because the inmates are there to serve their debt to society, and the staff is there to go home at night to their family.
Yeah.
Well, let me, something else you may not know too. I think this would be a cool thing to bring in. You know that now we have college courses actually where students can take college courses inside the correctional facility with the inmates, and it alleviates two types of stereotypes. One is that society may fear the inmate who comes out, right? But also inmates fear society because of the judgment. So it kind of lifts two stereotypes. And I find the programs to be amazing because of the partnership that starts inside the correctional facility that manifests its way out. But I also have one other thing I want to mention too.
Amazing.
That's
amazing.
Right, now check this out. Now you have a reach that I don't have, okay? Definitely have a reach that I don't have, right? Even though all my intentions always been good intentions, but you have that perspective of the other side that I don't have, you know, because of where I'm at in my field. But how would you feel if, like we talked about PREA, right? We talked about policies that are being put into play so we can do the right thing, so we can save lives, so we can stop sexual assaults. But believe it or not, there are inmates that have manipulated those policies. And now what I mean by manipulate those policies is that they use those to benefit themselves. So I'll claim a false sexual assault so I could be moved to another cell. You know, or I'll claim a false sexual assault against staff. So
I was going to say, false allegations against staff is a big one. They use that a lot.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when you were talking about your point, and I agree with everything you say 100%, or I wouldn't be writing what I write. But I do want to mention that it goes both ways. Of course, we want to get the staff member who's abusive, but there are some inmates that unprovoked will hit an officer. We have to pursue that just as strong with criminal charges.
I agree.
As we pursue the officer with criminal charges. We can't pursue the
balance.
officer with criminal charges. We got to pursue the inmate too with criminal charges.
Absolutely.
If he's in the wrong.
I agree 100%.
Right, and you know what I like about you is because it does create the balance. Because just as I'm going to tell you right now, if there's an officer doing something wrong, that's a bad reflection on the professionals that are doing something right. Get rid of that officer.
Right.
Get rid of that officer. Same thing with to protect us from the inmates that do something wrong. But my thing is I can protect staff from manipulation as best I can. I could. teaching them more about their vulnerabilities, what can make them vulnerable, and let them be aware of the games that inmates play. But having said that, when you have these policies that are created that are pushed into the prison system without anyone with experience at the front line to tell you how these policies can be manipulated, well, now I can't protect my staff anymore, because inmates will know, like if let's say there's a policy that I want to take advantage of. Inmates know these policies. They know that, okay, if I say this, staff's got to do this. So now what happens here is, now unfortunately, the inmate will make some bogus claim knowing that staff is now going to have to run around to, so I'll give you one more example if I may. Suicides. We take suicides or attempted suicides very seriously.
Very seriously.
Okay, very seriously. And if anything, if not for the benefit of the inmate, it's also selfish on us. We lose that inmate on our watch, it's our ass.
Yeah.
So there's motivation for us to make sure we do our tours and check on the well-being of the inmate. Also, having said that, there is some staff that I know of that have been truly affected by the suicide of an inmate, because they hold themselves as professionals and they feel totally responsible for the life that was taken.
And they need counseling sometimes
yes.
afterwards, because they feel bad that the inmate committed suicide on their watch.
On their watch.
Yeah.
And there's also the what do you call it, the mortality of it all too. Like, that's a grown life. I just watched the life, get taken from me. But my concern is this: how would you feel if you dealt with an inmate who you knew abused the I'm going to kill myself, where he had no intent to do that, all because he now wants to move to another cell or get out of a unit? So Jameel, I'll go you first, and I'll have you as a retired captain.
How would I?
Yeah, how would you feel knowing that there were inmates taking advantage of policies that are meant to protect other inmates?
Listen, so I don't have to tell any of the other gentlemen here on this panel, but the prison population are probably the most manipulative human beings on planet Earth. So it's no surprise to me that they're manipulating that clause that in the system now. But they were, I remember when I was in, guys would go to the, gate and say, "Hey, I fear for my life." That was a way to move to another section of the jail, or to PC, which in some jails was pretty lush, because there was no one there that was scary, So, but
like yourself.
Yeah. But I definitely wanted to ask, not to change the topic on you, Anthony, but I wanted to ask the captain what he thought about the private prison system, because now I've noticed that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has just put forth a new policy where he's going to roll back some of the advances that the Obama administration set forth, and as it relates to minimum sentencing. So now what this is going to do, now we have a product, which is the prison system. You have a business that needs a client. So, and now I just find it very strange that all of a sudden we're rolling back all these gains we've made over the last 8 years as it relates to minimum sentencing, and now all of a sudden the private prisons are going to step in that place. So not only are the inmates aren't safe, the staff's safe, they're undertrained, they're overworked, they're underpaid.
I've been through this when they first started it in Florida, and what wound up happening for a lot of them, they were picking and choosing the inmates. They would only take the inmates that hadn't been in trouble, minimum custody inmates, that short times and stuff like that. Their training is not even close to the training that we have to go through to be an officer. And but there was a situation actually that I was supposed to have been involved in, but I wound up going out of state, and I knew what was going on. There was a place that was called Jimmy Rice Act. So when an inmate had a sexual charge on him on children, they felt that he was still a danger to children. After he got out, they would be placed in an institution for that until they termed that he could go back on the street. Well, this was privately run. They just wound up, the inmates took over that whole institution.
Of course. And
they were camping outside the institution. They were still fenced in, but not in the dorms hanging out. The officers, they just left and would hang out outside
Now,
the
is
gate.
that because of a lack of training and a lack of procedure?
Lack of training, lack of procedure. So what wound up happening is a lot of our teams, I was a commander over one of the special weapons teams and chemical agent team. And our team and our SWAT team, Highway Patrol, and several other institutions, we went to that institution. And we had to take it back over, which was no problem. It was taken back in no time. We had to use some chemical agents to get some of them to comply with their orders. But
Which the point is, it was the state
it-
correctional officers who had to go pull the private prison out of a bind because they had not.
Right, but can I feed off that real quick, and I want you to cut me on it,
Yeah.
because first off, that to me was the ultimate betrayal by this presidential party. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to talk politics, but it was a betrayal to me because I believe in the safety and security of the system. Okay, I do, and I feel that when you owe something to shareholders as opposed to owing it to the community,
Correct.
the public, they're going to be
Correct,
more
Anthony.
concerned. Yeah, they're going to be more concerned about profit. Now, the thing is, on both ends here, here's where there's room for advocacy on both ends. Okay, I'm talking about inmate advocacy as well as safety and security, custody advocacy. Is that the thing is this? There's a couple of things here. One thing is safety and security trumps everything.
yes,
You're going to have to spend money.
Public safety.
Okay, corrections is not. Human life is not meant for profit. You're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to spend money for the overall well-being of the institution itself, dealing with the inmates, dealing with staff, program and rehabilitation, right? But the other, and I know we discussed this before, is the training that they're receiving. You know, the training that they're receiving is very subpar. They cherry pick the inmates they get, so there's a false narrative that they're saving all this money. No, they're not. They're cherry picking the best of the best inmates that they could get.
Exactly,
So,
right.
but ultimately, overall, the reason why I'm not a big fan of privatization, and I think this kind of blends in with his immigration laws, by the way, is that he's looking to flood prisons to make money, right? See, now the reason why I don't play left or right, and we discussed this on the show, is that, you know, when people get arrested and they go to jail or prison, it's got to be for the right reason, just like when you release them. We're in desperation mode right now. Are we going to let people go on crimes because we just can't afford to house them anymore? That's not right. Just like it's not right just to house them because we have to fill up beds. If not, the state's going to get penalized. You know, so either way, you got to do things for the right reasons. And when you're on the left and the right, there's not a right reason. The reason is in the middle. You do it because it's the right thing. If someone commits a crime and this is what the crime entails, then this is where they go. But we're not just putting people in prison for the sake of making money or taking people out for just the sake of saving money. I know that you wrote an article recently
Right,
for Question
I
One on
did.
privatization. What's your thoughts as an inspector?
Well, my thoughts on the private prison system are, let me get on my soapbox here. They, in no way, shape, or form, have the interest of the inmates at hand. Zero. The inmates are human beings being used to make money by these companies and these private-owned individuals and it goes all the way up the political chain. And what I found when I would go to South Bay, and I'll just say the names, they can come after me if they want to, South Bay and Moorhaven Correctional
I'll
Institution.
put your contact information
There you
right
go,
out.
put it right on there so they can get me. When they would send me there, because the state inmates would be in these private prisons, so as a prison inspector, if something happened where the inmates made an allegation or there was any type of allegation, I still went to the private prison to do the investigation. And I would see officers that were not criminally terminated, but administratively terminated from some of our state prisons, meaning they're not good enough to work at our state prison. They're now hired by the private prison industry watching our state inmates again. If they're not good enough for the state, they definitely should not be working at the private prison. Why did the private prison take them? They're already certified.
Right.
They've already been through the training. The private prison doesn't have to pay for their academy. That's more money they save. Everything with the private prison system is how can we save a buck? There's no rehabilitation in this.
Can I add something on that?
Yeah.
Because it's you knew what I was going to. Listen, can I tell you something? When I'm an officer and I walk the tier, I need to trust the people that you're
Right.
putting to me. You know what I mean? You got to realize something. The person that walks the tier has no influence of the officer that's going to work next to him. You understand that? That means that I'm trusting that this person is going through an academy, his background check's been exhausted, you've done everything you can. So if something happens, okay, it happens. Unfortunately, the system's not perfect, but I know that you've exhausted every effort because that person you're putting next to me is the person I'm trusted that to also protect me, to back my life. He's the person that's going to help me go home. And on another avenue, which again you mentioned, is the conflict. I'll bring this up with Jameel. There's got to be a conflict where, okay, so hear me out. The number one objective of corrections is to eliminate recidivism, right? Sure. So we want to get programming, we want to get education, we want to do whatever we can to help these inmates make better choices so they don't come back into the system again, right? But if you're a business and you want to make money, wouldn't that conflict with the overall mission of recidivism? Like, why would I want you to do good when it's going to take away money from me because you're not going to occupy a bed?
I could not imagine that the private prison system would allow me to do some of the things I did in the state facilities, like college courses, welding courses, other mechanical courses, where I was actually able to learn something that I was able to actually put to use once I was back in society as a citizen. I couldn't imagine that the state system would allow me to learn any of those things because it costs. You have to bring in instructors, you have to train an instructor, you have to train an instructor on safety issues. And I remember, even with the private prisons and even with the state prisons, it's the same thing. I remember, and again, it all comes back to safety for both the inmates and, most importantly, the staff and the custody.
If I just may say, the only difference between our communication, and it's true just because of our perspective, is you'll say inmates in custody, I'll say custody and inmates, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's the perspective. But that's fine. That's
sure, absolutely. I remember when I got hurt a couple times. I remember my medical care was bar none. I remember a few years ago, Anthony, and also you, Captain, you may even know a little bit about this. I remember a few years ago here in Florida, I think one insurance company or one health provider lost a huge contract because of all of the, people died, and just because they were given aspirins for situations that deserve.
Take these aspirin and go to bed, and nothing else was done. Right.
Well, part of the inspector job is not just. You're investigating all elements of corrections, from medical to.
I've had dental complaints from the dental department. I've investigated medical complaints. You name it, in our office investigated. I've investigated civil rights cases. I was on the civil rights team. I had to go to Tallahassee once a year to get updates on civil rights laws and investigations. So we did everything from civil to criminal to administrative.
Right, and again, the reason why we have the objective agency is because they answer directly to the person in charge, who may have reasons why he'd want those things fixed immediately. So people really think like, oh, but you're being investigated by your own. No, they're an objective agency, and at some point you have to go against leadership. I mean, the person that you reported to was the person you wind up pretty much getting the handcuffs on.
Well, long story short, without telling it, as you know, the Secretary of the Department of Corrections is in my book. He was as corrupt as they come. The Secretary of the Florida Department of Corrections, he's in my book. When you have somebody at the top level being as corrupt as he was, and you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, Captain, but you know. What does that tell your lower echelon? Yeah. Well, if he can get away with it, maybe I can do something too.
Yeah, leadership starts at the top.
Yes.
So, in corrections, you're not looking for bosses, you're looking for leaders. And I think that if you see the top people and they're getting away with whatever they feel they can get away with, unfortunately, believe it or not, if lower level people, if they see that, one thing is they'll mimic that, they'll model after that. But also another thing is I have leverage too. Mm-hmm. If I see, let's say you're a captain and you do something foolish, try to reprimand me if I just saw you do it. Don't think that's not going to come back at you.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why you try to. Yeah, you try to preach, but the thing is, as a leader, you have to lead. You have to lead. You have to lead by example. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, is that when I lead, I like to think 100%, but nothing's ever that I made the best choices I could. Right. In my field, which would benefit both sides. Because there are times when you're right, officer's not always right, and we deal with it respectfully. There's times when the inmate's not always right, and we deal with it respectfully.
And it always begins with training. I wanted to ask the captain, what training? The most important part of training is. Because I've obviously, as an inmate, I didn't go through training.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't go through level of force continuum?
No,
yeah, we did a lot of training. It was a mandatory 40-hour every year, and we had cultural diversity, defensive tactics, inmate manipulations, and,
When you say cultural diversity, what is that exactly?
cultural diversity is we deal with all ethnic backgrounds. We have Orientals, we have the blacks, we have the whites, from every part of the nation.
I'm so glad you said that because, I didn't know that. I mean, like I said, the bar's moved so much since I've been
Right.
in.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in, I just, remember sitting back and just looking at the offices and thinking, like, they had no clue, these
Yeah.
upstate New York guys, how to handle these inner city young
Right.
black kids. Like, they just
Yeah.
didn't understand any of the cultural nuances, and I think that that misunderstanding, that loss of communication there is where some issues could have been de-escalated.
Yeah. Well, we do. I was actually certified to teach cultural diversity, and even with our officers and staff, we had all nationalities. And when we had classes, it worked out very well, because we could set people up in all the different cultures, their cultures, and they could communicate. We set in little groups, and they could communicate about how their background was when they came up, and the same with me and whoever was there.
Mhm.
And we learned a lot about people that were not all the same.
Correct.
Their beliefs and our beliefs are totally different.
Because I remember an incident where the guy, he was an older inmate, he was about 50, maybe 55, 60 years old. At the time I was 20 years old, and I remember one of the corrections officers teasing him because he didn't speak well. He was uneducated, but he was a very proud man, very very respectful to the other inmates, and and he was like a leader, But then you had the correction officer like teasing him because of the way he spoke, and I remember that created such resentment in that man.
Yes.
That would make the other inmates upset too.
Right, and you know what? That's another thing. Like believe it or not, custody sets the environment that's conducive for rehabilitation, right? I mean, we talked about that. I mean, they set the environment for programs to occur, for positive change to occur. I mean, that's where we're at now. Corrections has evolved to the point where there is rehabilitation. That's the priority, but it doesn't supersede the safety and security aspect. So custody now that you would, if you went, I don't want you getting locked up now, but if you were in the prison system now, looking from the outside in, that would be better, obviously, looking from the outside in, especially in a political position like yourself, you would see that there is a teamwork here. Believe it or not, there's a lot more positive interactions. Custody does interact with the inmates. They set the environment, and when some people there's always the talk about solitary confinement. The people want to push to get rid of it. What they don't realize is, and this is an issue here too. Solitary confinement is not someone in the pitch black dark pissing in buckets. It's not the case. They're removed from an area of the prison, placed to another area where they receive help. They receive programming. It's more intensified. But having said that, the reason why that person has been removed is so we could focus on the many who want to do something right. Because you'll have the inmates come up to you and say, listen, I'm trying to do this stuff, get this guy out before we do something with him. So it's not just the fact that it's a punishment, to some extent it is, you got to reestablish some type of behavior, but it's also a sense of safety, both for the inmate that's being removed and for the others who are trying to take advantage of what we have to offer, because while many people worry about that one, the movement probably happened because of that one affecting the many, and we would be open to it, like people want to get rid of it, that's fine. We'd be open to it if you can give us another solution. But there isn't another solution. There isn't another solution to remove that inmate so others can move forward. You know what I mean?
Well, speaking to that, I remember, the old guys they would always say, don't upset that officer. Leave him alone. Don't antagonize him. So there is
There's a partnership.
There is some level of policing on our side as
yeah.
well.
Oh, I can tell you
self-policing.
through my experience, the old, we called them convicts, the old ones, and the newer ones, inmates.
Inmates, yeah.
Well, the convicts, they controlled the institution. We got one officer to every 250 inmates where I work.
So
You know,
scary.
and
That is so
Well, there's
scary.
got to be, you know what? And I want to,
So
I
scary.
want to, yeah, it is. But I want to continue up on something that he just said. You know what? We call it jailing, but there is some in-house management that the officer, within reason, being professional, not breaking any rules, they get a lot of discretion on how they can run their unit professionally. Don't get me wrong. No one's breaking rules here. I'm talking about through communication skills, getting stuff done, and you know, and yeah, there is some level where if there's a young kid that's acting out, I've seen officers say, you know what? I'll talk to some of the old heads, and professionally they'll sit down. We have mentoring programs where younger inmates that, you know, look to change, look to do the right thing, can meet up with an older. And I've seen those older inmates back up that younger inmate. When a gang member goes to get that inmate to, you know, maybe join a group, whatever it is, no, not him. Go mess around with someone else, but not him. I've seen that there's, you know, and it's great because it's something positive. You see someone wants to make
Again,
the change.
it goes to safety for everyone.
Everyone.
It's safety for the inmates, safety for the officers.
And while you're-
Right, yeah, there you go. That's
In that
fine, that's your
order,
order, yeah.
in that order.
But you know, and again, but that's the key, and that's why we do. His whole career was based on safety and security
Right.
for both.
And that's why while we're on the topic of solitary confinement, I wrote some things on solitary confinement too, and I
Right.
know you have too.
Yeah, I did a
But
lot.
I agree, we must keep solitary confinement, but I wrote in my article, it must be used properly. It's a tool, not a punishment system. Now, we have to remove a dangerous person from the prison population to prevent him from hurting other inmates or officers. But here's the
Or
one...
continuing negative
Or
behavior.
continuing
There
negative
you go,
behavior.
there you go.
Here's the thing that I am not happy with. There's too many inmates. Anthony mentioned we're turning into a medical facility, a mental health facility.
yeah.
What are we doing with some of the mental health inmates? Medication, put them in
They're walking
solitary
zombies.
confinement,
Yeah,
and
they
we
are.
forget about them. We have
Absolutely.
moms calling the inspector's office. My son's been in confinement for 12 months, drugged up. They're not even letting me visit him. Okay, I know there's rules, and we have to follow those rules, but I think we're going a little too far on drugging them up, throwing them in the solitary and forgetting about them.
Yeah, well, the scary thing is, though, if I may, unfortunately, because there's no, like, when they pose a threat to the facility itself.
Well, they're a threat to themselves and
Yeah,
the facility.
yeah, we
They
don't
have
know.
to be in there.
Yeah, it's very tough for us to deal with them. So a lot of
Right.
officers have taken the drug aspect of it all for the inmates, saying, you know what, at least they're quiet and it
No,
remains
I
safe.
understand. I
You know what I mean?
understand that.
But I agree with you 100%.
But for the
Is
welfare of the human being,
it's
that's not working
I
too
agree.
good. Yeah.
I
Well,
agree
I'll-
100%.
I'll tell you from
Actually, we didn't take mental health inmates, put them in a confinement unit. They actually had an institution.
Well, they have their own dorm for
Yeah,
them,
for
yes.
their own
But
dorms
they're
and
still in
stuff.
solitary.
Well, we have that.
They're
We have the
still
residents and the
solitary.
treatment.
but
Yeah.
at least they're
Right,
communicating
because
with one
our
another.
confinement unit, when they got a disciplinary report, it was investigated before it ever come. We have what we call the DR court, disciplinary hearing. I sat as in charge of one. A lot of times you'd have a classification officer, and then you had another officer there. We would hear his statements. We would go through, because he was allowed also to get his witnesses, and we'd have witness statements from the officer and the inmate. And if the inmate came out where, you know, we felt that he was in the right, then he walked out the door. But if he was found guilty, we could sentence him up to 120 days, but no more than that, pretty much. Now, if he was constantly over and over again, we would put him in what we call the CM unit, maximum security unit, but he had to go through a long process where it was felt that he was an endangerment to staff and other inmates.
Wow,
And-
things are so different now.
It's because
There's
now.
so many. There's so much bureaucracy, so much red tape.
Yeah.
But I will tell you before you move on, Anthony, is that as an inmate, I remember us. We would always say we had this phrase called "in jail, going to jail."
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would always say, like, listen, you can't stay out of trouble. There you are. You're going to jail. If you
Right.
do that, you know you're going to jail. I mean,
They
we're
go
already
to
in
the box.
jail.
Well, you would hear
so
inmates-
we considered the box jail.
Even now,
That's
you
it.
still hear inmates say, "Where's Johnny?" Oh, he's in jail.
Oh,
Yeah, he's in prison, but he's in jail. I still hear it.
And to just go back on solitary confinement, or otherwise known as restrictive housing, is the reason why we have to flood these areas with programming is because that's being attacked as a use to control.
Right.
So we need to show people that, guess what?
It's a protection.
It's a protection aspect, and we flood it with programs, so you can't say they're being left and forgotten, because that's no longer the case. Now, before we come to a close, I know we got to, I just want to ask Jameel one question, from both perspectives. What is it that you think the community doesn't understand about corrections? Like if you were sitting at the table and you were creating policy, right? Do you think it's important for also those on both sides, the inmate advocacy, the union side of things? Do you think it's okay that we were all together working for something that could benefit the picture as a whole?
Wow, man, now you're talking, another 20 years ahead in the future, but
hey, let's talk about tomorrow.
So I really wish they would get the perspective of someone like myself, a former inmate, who's gone on to do great things both in their community, I just wish if they were able to get our perspective, what they would understand is that we too are humans. We too have screwed up. We understand that we have screwed up, and now we understand that we have to pay our price. Again, not a blanket statement, because some of us don't understand that. And the operative word there is us, because I was one of them. Some of us don't understand. Hey, what am I doing here? Hey, don't do that to me. Oh, give me my cigarettes, or give me my commissary. I don't care what you say. Well, no, Mr. X, you lost your commissary because of X, Y, and Z. And then they flip out. So I wish that we were able to come up with a program where policy was created with the input of the inmate, the corrections officers, in that order. Because with the absolute understanding, Gary, that prison is prison.
Right.
Prison is not there to prison not
pamper
to pamper you.
Right.
It's there to allow you to pay your debt to society, protect society from you, but it's also not there, more importantly, to dehumanize.
Right.
We're not there to, they already have their punishment taking them away from society, so it's not the officer's responsibility
to continue
a punishment towards that inmate.
Right,
And again, and that's where you were saying the diversity training comes in. It's so important, because that diversity training allows the officer to understand, not give him a break, the inmate, but it allows that officer to understand certain nuances in inmates' behavior that's from the inner city, where they're from, a very complete rural area, and they just,
Well, you got, you're right. I agree with the training, obviously, because I agree that training also should push on to street police as well. Because it's good, because you got to know it's a different type of interaction. And if I want to mention something too, real quick, before we come to a close, is that I still want people to know that in order to deter behavior, so people don't do it again, there has to be some aspect that highlights, okay, this is punishment. Now, in regards to that, foundation for new hope, the foundation to make better choices, you know what I mean? But you can't, they don't work in isolation of each other. Like, if we're punishing somebody, then we're not rehabilitating them. Or if we're rehabilitating them, we got to get rid of punishment. No,
you need both.
They coexist.
Yeah.
And I think that's somewhere where the public doesn't see that.
They don't understand that, a lot of people.
Yeah, they don't understand that there has to be a balance, because if there's not a balance, then there's nothing to deter. Because I'm going to tell you something, there are some people right now that can do 10 years on their head, easily. You know what I mean? So 10 years to them is nothing, because they know that life for them on the streets is going to be a lot harder for them than life inside the prison. But the thing is, that's still not the proper way of thinking. You need to know that, hey, listen, life could be better if you get the choices. And also, I want to add something, this maybe go more toward yours, but the community aspect, like the transitional part of it all, where once someone leaves the facility, we kind of have to embrace that individual, help them grow, because if not, that person's going to wind up going back to survival mode. And survival mode is when they start making choices that are not what we worked on inside the prison.
Survival mode.
Right, and I want to say that that's lost, believe it or not. Like, people can blame corrections all they want, but I promise you, we're working our asses off behind that wall to help somebody. But once they get to the community and there's no offers for them, and they come back,
You know, it's funny you say survival mode because it's very fitting. We're sitting in a ring, okay, and some of the best fighters in the world have trained in this very ring. And some of the things that we're taught, again, it all goes back to training. Some of the things that we're taught, when it gets hairy and hectic in there, stay calm, stay relaxed, revert back to your training, and then
That's what we say in training.
Yeah,
We say the same thing.
Same thing.
stay calm.
And
But
survival
that applies
mode.
to,
Right,
I
and
don't
then
think
that way
applies to the
you
real world.
avoid going into survival mode, because in the ring, if you go into survival mode and just start flailing away, you're gonna get caught with something right down the middle.
No, I see where you're coming at.
You see,
Yeah.
it's
You gotta control your survivor mode, not go
correct.
wild
Stay,
with
stay
it.
calm, stay
Yeah.
cool, stay collected.
Yeah.
Revert back to your training, and we'll get out of this
Right.
together.
Right, and that
And it's
applies
the
to
same
real
thing
life.
with same thing with real life corrections, on the street policing. That's just,
Well, then, you know, when it comes to any type of training, boxing, martial arts, believe it or not, the training can easily be applied to real life, you know, because the last thing you want is a desperate fighter. You know, well, guess what? We don't want someone desperate in society either. We also don't want the system to be desperate. You know, again, that's the left and right of things. So, okay, so just in closing, if I may, before I say my closing thoughts, retired Captain Duane Canady, is anything you'd like to say to the audience before we close?
I think this program here has been very beneficial to all of us. I think just being here with you guys and Jameel, I've learned a lot, and I want to say I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
For what you've done.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Gary, author of Corruption Behind Bars. By the way, before we go, I love meeting you. I didn't expect you to be so tall. Maybe it's because I'm so short. And guys, look at the chair they gave me. Like it matters. I'm still shorter than
How
most
did Anthony
people.
get as tall as me?
Yeah.
I can't figure this out.
But is there anything you'd like to say? Author of Corruption Behind Bars, Inner Circle, anything you'd like to say?
Well,
to the
I would like to say thank you to everyone here tonight, and I thought it was a very good talk, and I hope that some people listen and also think of what they would do about some of the situations we talked about tonight to make things better. And I want to thank all those hard-working folks out there that work all the holidays and weekends and nights and 12-hour shifts and corrections and on the police. And I'm going to say that I want the folks that have family members in prison to please keep praying. Let's get them through their prison time and back out on the street, and let's try to get them back on the right track, because I know how families' hearts hurt when their son or daughter goes to prison. So God bless all of you, and thanks for having me on
All
tonight.
right, and Jameel McCline,
Thank
first
you.
off, big fan. When I walked in, I'll be honest with you, I was a little intimidated.
Yeah.
But again, thank you for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to say to my audience?
Well, one of the first things I'd like to say is that rolling back some of these Obama era, and I don't want to get political, it is what it is. Rolling back some of these Obama era minimum sentencing does nothing but overpopulates the system, burdens the system, and then further can cause more danger to both the inmate and the officers. So, you know, I just really want us to come together and fight as much as we can to avoid some of these rollbacks, because these nonviolent inmates, these drug addict inmates, they don't need prison time. They need drug and alcohol treatment. They don't need to be sitting in the prison for having 5 pills on them that were unprescribed. That was some of the things that we fought back in the cocaine and the crack cocaine era.
80s.
And let's not roll back to some of these antiquated policies. Other than that, thanks for signing a great book for me. I plan on
yes,
reading
sir.
the book
Thank
cover to cover. And thanks for having me on, brother.
No, always a pleasure. And I want to have you back on again because I want to discuss low-level offenders. I think that would be a great conversation
Yeah,
for all
that's
three of us
a
to
big
share,
issue.
because we make, as I said, people need to go to jail for the right reasons. So again, I really do think that we together, the middle road, I think we can really put a perspective out there. It's not. It's not neither left nor right, which is great. It's middle ground, which needs to be covered. Right. I also want to say a couple of things in closing. By the way, recently we had Sergeant Megan Callahan from North Carolina was killed trying to put out a fire. It was a setup. She was targeted by an inmate. They took her life. He put a fire on the dorm. She came out there with a tool to put the fire out, which was an extinguisher. her, and he beat her to death. She was recently a sergeant for a year. I believe she was in her 20s. Very young female. And then recently there was a big issue at Pelican Bay. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. 2 inmates got into a fight. Officers went to respond to stop it. Next thing you know, they were ambushed by inmates. So I just wrote an article on setup, and I just want people to realize, just be careful of your environment, because we have a need to want to help. We're first responders, but in the process, we always have to make sure that the scene is safe and secure, and and unfortunately, actions like this make us hesitant. But at the end of the day, if the scene is not safe or secure, we cannot provide help, because our life will be in jeopardy. So we need to make sure that when we attend to a scene and we're trying to assist, that we're able to assist that person at 100%. And unfortunately, the last 2 instances just highlight the fact that inmates can sometimes set it up. And I do agree with him 100% on the safety of officers and inmates. Again, that's paramount.
And
we're joking. Yeah. And by the way, I'm saying that, and we joke about the order, but believe it or not, that safety coexists.
Yeah.
That's what the officers are there for. And having said that, even though we're joking about the inmate, the point is, ultimately, together, it's the safety for staff, which equals the safety for the inmates, safety for the facility at all, and at a total level. So it's good that we have conversations like this, because I'm going to tell you something. A couple of years ago, we wouldn't want to talk, because at the end of the day, the world would think that because I'm one side, I'm against the other.
Right.
But what about if
That's
people
not
start
true,
seeing that the sides connect?
That's right.
And it's one side that helps the other. And that's what we're making the attempt here. So, as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Follow us on multiple venues, and I'll post this up on Corrections 1. Stay safe. Love you guys. We are out.
Oh, man, that was good.
Wow.
That was excellent.